Yeah, we have had technical difficulty. So if those of you who have been enjoying our chatter, welcome. I'm Dana Brooks of Face It Brooks Law Offices, and this is another episode of the EmPower Hour brought to you by the EmPower Plant. I'm so excited today. We have a special guest. We have Carrie Boyd with us. She is the policy director of the Southern Poverty Law Center. And we were just talking about that because they're based out of Montgomery, but she's here and she's been with them a year. We'll hear more from her later. I want to welcome Carrie Roan. She's with us at least at the beginning for a while. We've got Rose Caswick back. We have got a special guest also. We've got Beatrice Paget, we call her B. She is the Jacksonville Face It Brooks office. That is what she does over there. She's keeping us organized and does our marketing and outreach, just basically everything we need in the Jacksonville office. So I'm so glad to have her because I don't get to see her in person very much. So.
Nice to see you, Miss Dana.
Miss Rose.
That's me.
A cocktail by any other name would not be as sweet. What is this beautiful pink refreshing beverage we're having today?
This drink is in honor of Selena, not related to talking about at all, but a powerful woman cut down too soon. So it's got tequila, grapefruit juice, Campari, lime, and it's not terrible.
Isn't it though? Is it not terrible?
It looks cute with your sweater, Rose.
As I match, I drip.
Is this the smoky tequila? It's the
Campari. It's the Campari that's bitter.
Okay.
Okay.
I appreciate the effort, Rose.
Thanks. It's pretty.
Yes, and we love Selena.
I mean, I guess J-Lo's in the news right now too.
So. Well, that was a domestic violence issue, wasn't it, with Selena?
Oh, it was her manager.
Right? What?
It was her manager.
Manager, crazy lady.
Yeah, she was killed by her own manager in like some type of domestic violence issue.
Good Lord.
Yeah.
Well,
freaking horrible.
She deserves cheers because she was a massive talent and had a lot to offer. That's a real shame. I don't mean to make light of that at all. I do, and this is kind of going to be a little bit of a heavy show. Carrie Boyd, she deals with some really important, impactful issues. And, we just had the George Floyd trial against, I don't like to even say his name, the guy who's guilty. And then we've got a session going on and you've been working downtown. Tell us about what's going on with session now and how it's a little different with COVID.
It is, and thank you all for having me today. I'm so glad to get to talk to you all, even if it's remotely, and I'm so glad to see your beautiful faces. So I am the policy lead here in Florida for the SPLC Action Fund, and this is the second to last week of session. So session wraps up next Friday on April 30th. You will find me at the beach on May the 1st, maybe for the next 10 days, I don't know. But it's definitely been a legislative session for the history books. There's never been one like it because of COVID and the restrictions that COVID necessarily put in play. And last year's session ended in early March, right before COVID really took effect and everything changed. And so this year has been very, very different. I was telling Dana before we jump live that access has really been restricted this year. And that's a real problem because you cannot step foot in the Senate. It's totally closed off to the public. If you want to testify on a bill, it's been limited to about a minute for testimony in most cases, unless you get a special clearance, which is really difficult to do. And then in the House side, you can get in the House, you can testify. Again, it's about a minute or two, and you have to have a special pass. And the other lobbyists and I call it the hall pass. So most of with lobbying, it's all about relationships. And, we're used to making those connections in the hallways and the elevators and restaurants. And we just don't have that same connectivity this year. So it's been a very challenging session.
Yeah, I can imagine that. Tell us, okay, you're a lawyer, you're educated as a lawyer, and do you primarily identify and work as a lobbyist, or tell us a little bit what you do and tell us what the Southern Poverty Law Center is, because a lot of people hear about that in the news, but don't realize that they're touched by it by your work here in our state as well. So tell us all about that.
Yes, so I am a lawyer. I've been a practicing attorney for about 15 years. I've put that on the back burner. And really what I do now is all lobbying and policy work for the SPLC Action Fund. Prior to this, I was a pro bono project director for Legal Services of North Florida and Legal Aid Foundation of Tallahassee. But I had been lobbying in some capacity for over 20 years on everything from domestic violence issues to racial justice, and many things in between. So I'm no stranger to this world, and I thrive on it and I love it. I grew up at an early age knowing that a woman's place was at the table. And so I've really taken that on and run with it. And I thank my mom, Martina Boyd Peterbow, if she's watching, for really putting that in my sister and me. And, knowing that you have to be out there and you have to be heard. And so the SPLC very much wants to be heard on issues of racial justice and racial parity. And we strive to be the catalyst for that change here in the South. We have, in coalition with our partners, of course, we have 5 offices or in 5 different states. And so Alabama, Florida, Georgia, Mississippi, and Louisiana. And we all work across many different climates, many legislatures that are typically not as warm to some of our issues. And so we're very excited about this work. We love it. And I couldn't imagine doing anything else.
Yeah, and I want to get a little bit more into that, but I want to come to Carrie Roan because I know her time with this is limited. Carrie, you know Carrie Boyd, and you all have were talking before we got started. But what are your thoughts, especially again with this week, with this verdict, and everything is so hot. There seems to be like a culmination of this. It's a Black Lives Matter thing, but it's everybody's behind it thing. It seems everything feels a lot more inclusive to me right now. What are your thoughts, Carrie Roan?
I have a general question. Carrie, if you could kind of tell our audience exactly what the Southern Poverty Law Center does with lobbying, because I don't think that a lot of people know what your mission is and how you actually serve people first. And second, this might be a loaded question for you, but I want to know what the sentiment is with the Southern Poverty Law Center on the verdicts, because a lot of people don't think that the verdict was enough, that it's just done to kind of satiate people. So I'm interested to know if you guys think that the verdict was good or if it should have been better.
All great questions. So in general, the Southern Poverty Law Center is a very large organization. As I said, we're across 5 states. We really seek to be the change for racial justice in the South. We work in coordination with our allies, and we're really focused on dismantling white supremacy, strengthening movements, and above all else, we are a civil rights organization. So we promote the civil rights of all people, whether it's Black and brown people, LGBTQ people, people in poverty. We're really seeking to have those rights heard and upheld. And in terms of lobbying, lobbying takes on many different forms. For us, it's not just as simple as here's a bill and let's get this bill through the legislature. It involves planning, it involves advocacy and education campaigns around the state. At the federal level, we have lobbyists at the federal level. And so we're really looking at policy, both in a big overview, 30,000 foot view, and then we come down on the state level as well. And so I have any number of bills that my organization has been championing this year. And there's some very wonky little procedural things to get it through. No, I won't go into that, but we do everything from the very fine details of talking with legislators and getting ideas put forward into bill form to the big picture campaigns of public awareness and outreach. So we
what kind of bills do you guys have right now that you're pushing for, for your cause?
Yeah, so we have a lot of racial equity bills that we're promoting. So fairness in the criminal justice system, where historically men and women of color have not had parity. The Black population in Florida is around 16%, and the incarceration.
I thought it was about 12 or 13, or is that
Yeah, and the incarceration rate hovers around 47%. So
wow,
there's a huge equity gap there. We're really looking at systems and structures that promote these inequitable situations. So in the school district, we're looking at what's called Baker Act reform. And right now, there's a lot of people who don't know, there is a law that says a police officer, or it's called a school resource officer, can involuntarily commit your child to a psychiatric institution without your knowledge or consent.
Wow.
And so that almost happened to Ryan and I, and our little girl was 5. She had a temper tantrum and the police were called on her. And only by the grace of all above and the fact that we're very privileged and can get across town and take time off work, that we were able to get her and spare her that trauma. That's one thing that we're working on. We're working on incentivizing folks who are incarcerated to get early earned release time so that they're rehabilitated, educated, trained, and more equipped to come back out into the world out here, because we know that the recidivism rate is way too high, that we have a real problem in the state with how people—
Because there's so few opportunities once they do get out.
Yeah, and then
Right.
you have a felony conviction, right?
Right. Yeah.
And so
So
there's-
your employment options are going back to the same stuff that got you in trouble in the
yeah,
past. And
yeah,
you think it's some kind of character deficiency? No.
no.
Yeah.
Most
Yeah.
of these issues are just opportunity. People are poor, people are desperate, people are in with the wrong group. And there's just a very judgmental nature here and
Yeah.
society as a whole, but especially in Florida. I've lobbied in many different states. It's a very tough climate here.
Well, and I think a lot of them are related to, I don't mean to get off topic, but I think a lot of them are related to pretty minor drug offenses with huge sentencing from, relating back to the 80s and the war on drugs, that I think a lot of those laws have been abolished, but yet people are still serving these really long sentences, which are unfair, which are completely unfair and inequitable.
Yeah, the sentencing guidelines haven't been revisited, and I
Right.
hate that because the legislature thinks they're in a better position than the judge who just saw the case and is going to apply the facts to the law and the evidence. It's angry, because I hate
Yeah.
this overreaching. The legislature shouldn't like the judges telling them what to do, but boy, they will take something from a judge and the judicial system and decide that they know best and that one size does fit everybody, and we don't need this judge, looking at the unique situations of this case. I hate it. Right. That's one reason I could never, ever continue working in the criminal justice system. The time I was a public defender and my client got 2.5 years for bicycling while black, I was like, that's crazy.
crazy.
That is crazy because of the way he scored out. And why did he score out? Because he had very few options. I mean, he's a user. He's
Right.
a user. He's not hurting everybody else's people. He needs his help. He needs help. He needs concern and compassion. But boy, we are short to provide that.
We are
We're real quick on the judgment.
very quick on the
We're not real
judgment.
good on the compassion. Carrie, did you have anything else? I wanted to get to Rose in a minute, but I know you have a time schedule. Did you
Yeah,
think-
sorry. I think I sidetracked all of us because I'm really interested to know what SPLC is thinking about the George Floyd verdict, and if it's enough, if it's gonna be a catalyst for more change. How do you guys feel about it?
Yeah.
I think it's first and foremost, it's accountability for Derek Chauvin for the murder of George Floyd. That we're very, very happy about that. But it's not justice. And if it were justice, George Floyd would still be alive.
Right.
If it were justice, we wouldn't have these systemic problems to begin with. And so we're very hopeful that all of us collectively can seize this moment and move toward greater reform. But I think anyone on this call and anyone listening knows that just one good conviction is not going to change the system, that this system is truly predicated on 400 years of inequitable resources and access to power. And so, and I say that I have a lot of friends in law enforcement who are, trying to do the right thing. I think one thing that really comes out of this is I do believe there will be a heightened sense of awareness within the brotherhood, and I say that brother and sisterhood of police, to be more vigilant and hold each other accountable, and that's been a very difficult thing to pierce. And so we're hopeful. We want to seize the moment. I hope that the George Floyd Policing Act passes on the federal level. And there is a bill pending on the House that would ban chokeholds in most situations here in Florida, and that would create a database if there were abuses of this. And so there are positive steps moving forward, but it's going to take a lot of work from all of us. The good thing about this discussion is that we are all part of the solution, and we continue to talk about it amongst ourselves and how we can help.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And with, so many of these issues used to divide us up. Black Lives Matter was different. Women's issues were different. LGBTQ issues were different. Disabled people, their issues were different. And I think we finally are getting some traction because we're not dicing ourselves up anymore. And we're realizing that so many of the things that each of these little groups struggle with, we all have in common, which is the dominant culture isn't working for us, the one that doesn't make room for people who aren't a certain way and look a certain way. And so I'm encouraged by it because I think a lot of people are coming together and caring about things that they used to go, well, that doesn't affect me. So that's not my fight. Or I don't really care about that. And so many of the things that affect people of color, women deal with them. People, and we don't talk enough about it, people who have disabilities, nobody thinks about them, very few people. So I appreciate the work that you do and the attention you call to it. And I'm hoping we're riding a wave here. And I'm hoping this momentum continues. Rose, I'd like to hear from you and see what you're thinking and what you want to talk to Carrie about.
Yeah, well, I was really interested to hear about that Baker Act reform bill, because that's obviously something that can affect anybody. It affected you personally, but is no doubt going to disproportionately affect African Americans and minority groups, because you see that starting early with discipline in schools, more detentions, more, up on your permanent record with Black children, and just because they're being looked at harder, I guess. And then families and things don't have the resources. You get on that school to prison pipeline and stopping it. So I was interested could you tell us kind of the origins of the Southern Poverty Law Center? Because I know I've been doing some reading in the last year and was really opened up to the way we look at these systems. Is like, well, this group is downtrodden and this group is this and this group is that. And so it's hard to change the status quo from where we even are currently. But then looking back to see how the system didn't just get this way, it was set up like this way. The African American community was over policed specifically so that they could press gang them into literal chain gangs and things like that because they needed the workforce. And so I'm wondering about the Southern Poverty Law Center, where it came into the scene and what the original, I guess, motivations were.
Yeah, how long has it been around? Wasn't it started by Morris, right?
Yeah, so SPLC was founded in 1971, right on the heels of the Civil Rights Movement.
Yeah.
And as you all know, Montgomery really was one of the, centers of the Civil Rights Movement. There was the march across the Edmund Pettus Bridge to Selma with John Lewis leading the way and Martin Luther King present during the march. And I would point out that under a bill that just passed today, or a bill that was signed into law today that you may have heard about, HB1, all of those people that were on that bridge would have been arrested for being bystanders when violence broke out. And I'm happy to talk more about that bill too, because it does primarily impact Black and brown people. And there are so many women activists and student activists that this bill would really harm. But the origin started right after the Civil Rights Movement, and the organization has grown just precipitously. It started out mainly as a civil rights litigation firm, an advocacy group, and has grown from there to include the Intelligence Project. And so the Intelligence Project tracks hate groups and other extremists. And there are hundreds of hate groups on our watch list. I can share more about that. We have some right here in Tallahassee. Let's just say I'm very mindful of my surroundings because I know that people know who I am, they know where I work, and I'm very vigilant about where I go and what times I go because we know that that threat is real. Also, there is the Learning for Justice Project, and that really provides resources for educators and children to talk about racial justice and to talk about these issues that are not always easy, especially for white people, to discuss. And it's really just to build up people and not make people being anxious or fearful. It's to empower everyone with information about how to talk to children, because, you know, we do believe children are the solution to so many of these ills in our society. And the offices have only grown. Florida was probably the last state to come on the scene, I think around 15 years ago. And we have offices here in Tallahassee. We have offices in Miami. Atlanta is a big office, Montgomery, New Orleans, Jackson, Mississippi. So we have a wide presence throughout the South. And now we have a very strong team in Washington, DC, that's helping us on the federal level. And so we continue to have kind of this tract of lawsuits working in conjunction with the policy and lobbying platform. So like, for instance, right now, I've been lobbying against HB1 all session. Unfortunately, it was a priority of the governor and of the speaker and the president. And I'm not gonna get into any.
That's another law we don't need.
We don't need.
There's not one thing that
No.
they're hamstring from keeping the peace. They don't need one additional law to keep a peaceful protest peaceful.
Right.
They need one thing.
That's right.
This is
We
not
don't need it.
grandstanding. This is playing to a base. This is politics. Instead of spending the time on things that we actually need to improve our lives in Florida, somebody did a little stunt.
Right. In this passage, it'll be a one-liner on a political mailer. I mean, that's just the reality of it.
Yeah.
And so now the litigation team is exploring their options for suing to have it found unconstitutional.
That's what I said the other day. All you're doing is creating more work for lawyers to challenge
Yep.
this thing and keep it in the courts. I mean, it's
Yep.
just, it's such nonsense. It's just utter nonsense.
And
I wish people would hold their legislators accountable when they get roped up into games like this and
it
get
is a game.
like that.
Thankfully,
Yeah.
we have really good legislators here in our area. I mean, all of our
We do.
members voted against it.
Yeah.
If you find the video of Rep. Alexander speaking passionately against it, I would encourage you to do so. Lorianne Osley spoke passionately against it on the Senate floor.
It's pure
Allison-
racist. It's pure racist because who are the
Awesome.
people who protest? It's usually not the privileged white people.
Right,
Right.
right.
Everything's
right.
going their way. What do they have to bitch about?
It's exactly
So, no,
right.
it's going to disproportionately affect people who are already taking it in the back.
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't like it.
Yeah.
It makes me mad. It's very hard for me to stay calm when we start talking about stuff like this. I get
Yeah.
fired up. When I lived in Montgomery for 6 months and I was a paralegal, and that was my goal. I was going to try to get in with the Southern Poverty Law Center when I was there. I was super turned on about it then, and I thought it was very local. I didn't realize how broad the reach has grown.
Mhm.
And but you know, if you do pay attention to the news, you hear about them a lot in the work that they do.
I've definitely had to get out there more, but I'm very mindful about what I speak on. And, you know, our mayor here in Tallahassee, he was the first mayor to come out in the state of Florida against HB1. And, you know, I was very proud of him for doing
Me
that.
too.
And
And
I
I'm
think
really proud of that leadership he's shown with this. I hate the term defunding the police. Whatever PR genius decided that's what we need to sell needs to be fired and made to do something like IT. Don't ever get a microphone in front of your face again. Don't ever hit send, because this was a fail. It's not defunding. You could have said this: why don't we keep law enforcement at their highest best use? Let's
Right.
right.
let's don't use them to do things that they don't do well. They're
Right.
skilled. Let's keep them at their highest best use, and let's get the people who are supposed to be taking care of social problems, social workers, to do that. And so this is a reallocation, and it's putting the right people in the right place. It is not defunding the police
Right.
and making us less safe the way it sounds. So I do appreciate our mayor's leadership on a lot of things, and he takes a hit for this stuff. You know, he gets excoriated for some of these things. But again, it's always coming from ignorance. Every time I hear the
Right.
criticisms of what he's doing, it's always backed up by profound ignorance. And so when people learn more and they educate themselves, then they're like, well, that does make sense. I can get behind that.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
think we all have to realize that, you know, this is a lifelong learning process. And, you know, at least I'm speaking just for myself, but, you know, I've had many privileges in my life. I had my education paid for. I went to law school. I had no problem finding employment. And so I recognize all of those privileges. And it has shaped my worldview. It's not to say that I haven't had problems. I'm a sexual assault survivor. My husband and I have had financial problems in the past. Like, we get it. You know, we've all struggled. But the difference is I have never struggled because of the color of my skin.
Exactly.
Mhm.
You know, I've never struggled because of wanting to get a home loan and being denied because I'm Black. And that is the harsh reality of what happened in this country, that we as white people really have to understand and listen when people are speaking about these historic realities.
That's
Yeah,
right.
when I was in paralegal school, one of the things we had to do when we graduated was submit our resume to the dean so they could, help us get jobs and that sort of thing. And I gave him mine, and he said, "You went to Booker T. Washington High School?" I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Just say Washington." He said, "Somebody's going to see that on your resume and think you're Black, and you won't even get a phone call. You won't even get
Wow.
your face in the door. You won't even get your foot in the door."
God.
That was in 1990.
Wow.
And that was, it sounds like a shitty piece of advice, but it wasn't, because what he was saying is, we may not like this,
Yeah.
but this is happening. This is how Black people get treated. And I thought to myself, gee whiz, man, what if my name was Shaniqua or something that was very traditionally African American? They
Right.
wouldn't even call me, would they? And no, they wouldn't.
Right.
The world's not the same for Katie as it is for Keisha. It isn't.
No. I will just leave this here and say that I have been specifically told by certain legislators, no one here, but others, that they do not want Black witnesses in the legislature, full stop. And so
God.
that is the reality of what
They don't want to hear from 16% of the people they represent.
they don't. And I think about that, and I think about some of the successes that we've had this year, and it's really been in trying to get those in power to see their own grandchildren in certain situations, whether it's the Baker Act or the juvenile expunction bill package that we're pushing.
That's great.
It has to be, they have to see themselves and their families in this situation. They don't always empathize or recognize other people's experiences. And so it's a very challenging climate.
B, what's going on with you? What is going through your head listening to all this?
So much.
Tell us a little bit about yourself, because you've not been on here, I think, but maybe one time. So reorient us to you and your background.
It's a tough conversation. First of all, Miss Carrie Boyd, I mean, my heart is just literally, I'm trying to hold back the tears.
Yeah.
Because this is a very, very tough topic. My little bit of my background, adopted at birth, US citizens, Americans, Mexican American. But I'll try to keep it, kind of bring it all together. But if my name was Beatrice Rodriguez, the doors wouldn't have been open to me. Because my name is Beatrice Pageant. The first thing that happened when I walked in the door was like, oh, but where'd you get the pageant from? Because you don't
look like a pageant.
don't look like a pageant. So that was one thing. So just constantly every day, just proving who I am, my work ethic, everything about me. It's tough. I happened to have the opportunities because my parents were privileged. So I was able to have those things. But because I was privileged, I experienced some things along the way that I knew I was not different. Yes, I have pageant, but I'm different. So that was always there. So my goal has always been, from the minute I wake up to the end, I don't want anybody to feel that way. I don't care what walks of life. I don't care what color, who you are, what you are, degree, no degree. I look at you the same way like I look at myself. We both have feelings. We both care. We breathe the same air. So this is just very tough. You also mentioned a couple of things as well as, the children being in school, Baker Act. My children went to a particular school because it was a magnet program. And because the African Americans were trying to provide an opportunity for their children, they wanted them to go to that magnet school. But because in that magnet school was located in a certain area, in a certain part of town, they were quick to, oh, you know, because a child is having a temper tantrum, Baker Act.
Yeah.
Throw it.
And
As
it's
I was
because
thinking
their
of my kids.
culture, yeah, because in the white culture is very demure, and it's not loud. You know, I always grew up like, you know, Black people are loud, they're real boisterous or whatever. It's a cultural thing. But whenever you're looking at it through the prism of a white, that's inappropriate behavior. Whenever in another culture, it could be, I'm very expressive. I'm here to talk about my feelings. I'm talking about right now. And yeah, whenever the people who have the power, you know, are deciding what's appropriate and what's not appropriate, it's scary. It's scary.
Almost happened to me
They just
with
wanna
my
shut you-
children. It
Yeah.
almost happened to me with one of my twins. She's very vocal.
Yeah.
But here's the thing, as a parent, you want your children to speak up, to be independent, strong women. But yet at the same time, at school, you know, you have to be quiet, you have to listen. So it's very, as a parent, it's a lot. You have to tell them, you be respectful, speak up. You're a strong young woman. I'm raising teenagers that are 14, be 15.
Mhm.
So, but then to also go to school when a teacher might not like it because they're being disrespectful, and they're quick to, they have those resources at a school where they can call an officer, they can call a counselor, they can put anything on their school records. So when you mentioned that about working on that issue that affects children, it is happening more and more and more.
That is.
And I'm here in Jacksonville, it is happening too often,
All the time.
all too often. And I won't name schools, I won't name areas, but it's happening too much because it's unfortunate.
That's another one of those things, just there's a different way to handle it with the same resources that you have. Law enforcement is not the stopgap for bad behavior type of things. You know,
Right.
there should be a way that people should be trained in how to de-escalate, you know, how to
Yeah.
get a child to be calm, how to meet them where they are at the energy level where they are, and relate to them, and then bring them down, slowly bring them down.
Mhm.
These are not, this isn't magic. These
No.
are very learnable things that
Very.
people could do to de-escalate these situations and keep law enforcement out of it. And my God, it's just good public policy. It costs a lot of money once you get all this, get into a system. That's a lot of resources being sucked up. It's hamstringing parents who are probably already don't need any additional stress, when you really just could have been calm and showed some leadership and gotten this kid into a calmer, safer place.
And just empathize that, you know, this is a child who is obviously having a moment, and it's a symptom of another problem. Is the child hungry? Is the child not sleeping? Is
Scared, being bullied.
domestic, right, bully? Is there domestic violence at home? And I will share the statistic with you that is just mind-blowing, but 37,000 Florida children are Baker Acted every year.
That's insanity.
Insanity. And, you know, so Representative Tant is co-sponsoring the Baker Act reform bill that's moving. It just passed out of the Senate today. It heads to the House. And so we're really hopeful that it's going to go. It would offer de-escalation. It would offer training, data collection, so we can better understand what the heck is happening with these kids. And you have to keep in mind too, and this is what, again, we're polite, especially in the South. We don't want to talk about this, but the reality is there are a lot of people profiting off of these Baker Acts.
Hell yeah.
The providers get minimum 48 hours of time billed to the state or to insurance, and they don't have an incentive to change the dialogue. And that has become really a focus of mine, is shining a light on that. And
Good.
you know, really wanting to understand. We have some investigative reporters internally that are helping, but you know, there's a real financial incentive at play here that's not focused on the best interest of kids.
Same thing with corrections. You know, when once we
Absolutely.
privatize prisons, there's a whole lot of money to be made by shareholders. It's corporate welfare because it's taking our tax dollars and giving it to private corporations and profits to their shareholders. And we're creating you know, generations of felons and people who
Yes.
contribute, and then they don't have their dignity, and then of course they're going to go out and make bad choices whenever they get back into society. So it's just it's a short-sighted plan to put some money, some taxpayer dollars into some people's pockets, but it's a bad societal issue. It costs us money. It's a drain. But when I was working in a psychiatric hospital, to Baker Act somebody, they had to be three things. They had to be homicidal, suicidal, or psychotic. I've
Yes.
never seen a kid like that.
And
I used
that's
to do social
really,
work in schools. The worst behaving kid I've ever seen wasn't homicidal, suicidal, or psychotic. They were just
yeah. They're supposed to have a mental illness. And so we're having school resource officers Baker Act children that do not have a diagnosed mental illness.
They have
Qualified to
no
diagnose
qualification for
They're
that.
not mentally ill.
They are so outside of their lane. They have
Yeah.
no business doing that.
They just want to get them out of the way. And I think you would find, you know, in conversations with many sheriffs, they don't want to be in this position either. And so the whole system has to change in how we handle this. And so SPLC is really trying to be a leader in that. There's not a real collective effort statewide to look at this. The PTA is behind it, and some other organizations. I chair the statewide No Place for a Child Coalition that focuses on the school to prison pipeline and reforms. But by and large, most of the focus is on adult reforms and not kids, and I think that's misguided. We know there is a correlation between Baker acting and getting sent to DOC later. And you're absolutely right, Dana. The Department of Corrections here gets about $3 billion a year in funding, and it's the largest agency. So we have to look at these institutions and why they continue to be supported. Who's profiting off of this? And it's not Black and brown people.
No, it isn't. It's shareholders of private corporations.
That's right. It's
It's
not
corporate.
women.
It's corporate welfare.
Yeah. So just to be
Make no
blunt,
mistake about it. They're taking your money and that's supposed to be spent serving you and your needs, and they're giving it to people who own big corporations. Does everybody understand that? I don't know why more people aren't offended by that. I would think there would be a revolution over it, but there isn't. You know why? Again, because most people go, well, my kid's fine. It ain't gonna affect me. I only have that one crazy brother who's been in jail. We're all good. It doesn't bother me if a bunch of people go to jail. It doesn't really affect my life, so screw it. Let's see. Carrie Brown, are you still here? Did she have to go?
She's gone.
She had to go. Rose, what are you thinking about? I get too fired up over these topics. Y'all. I'm about to go.
that's good.
And I'm like you, Miss Dana. I'm as a parent. No, it does not
If
have to
somebody
be.
did that to my kid, you know what they would have? They would have to peel me off of them. They would never get rid of me. They would
Because,
see
you
my
know,
face every day.
Exactly, because if in that situation, it's like it's not my child, but my children come home and tell me so and so class was taken out of school with a resource officer, and then they find out Monday, Tuesday, they've been Baker acted.
Yes.
And when I ask that affects my children. That psychologically affects my
They
children.
just disappear their friends.
Their
Disappear.
friend
Not
disappears,
be affected.
and then when they find out a week later, he was hungry, he was tired, and he just had a bad day. So I know when I was in high school, I could be having a bad day, and I could go to the library and I could sit down. She's like, okay, what's going on? I'm
Yeah.
just tired.
Or the guidance counselor or something.
Guidance counselor, the cafeteria. But now it's so much, no, if you do this, I mean, it's the handbook for the Duval County schools it's sad.
I think it's telling these people early on what power is. And it's telling you right now, watch it. I got the power.
We came
Watch
up with
it.
these rules
And they're
not
telling you as a
help
little
you,
person.
but
Yeah.
to screw
It's
you.
not to help you, it's to keep you in your place. It's to keep their boot on your neck. Rose, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm thinking about it with the children. It's so interesting because it's something I hadn't considered. And then I was just thinking that just recently there was that story of like a 7-year-old or something who was arrested and was going to be tried for vandalizing someone's flower beds, picking up
Yeah.
freaking flower. And it's like the sooner they can get you in the system, the
Mhm.
better it's going to be for you to get out. As a 7-year-old, that's ridiculous with a
Yeah.
record that's now been shown what mistreatment really looks like.
Have mens rea as a 7-year-old.
Yeah.
7-year-old. So if you ever have time and really want to get furious and pissed off, I will send you a link to one of the House committees that debated our minimum age of arrest bill. And they were arguing in favor of arresting 6-year-old children because you just
Okay.
know,
What's the basis? Just give me the punchline.
yeah, there could be some great big huge kid that's 6 but looks 12, and that's code for he could be a big Black kid.
Mhm.
And that's
The size differences, and
all about that. And Black children are adultified at a very young age, and so when I hear things like that,
Vilified at a very young age.
vilified, right? I mean, it just shows you just the absolute uphill battle we face in the state. And right now I'm fighting for language in a bill that says children under 7 cannot be arrested. And that's probably all I'm going to get this year.
And that's what you have to fight for.
I can't believe you have to go fight for legislation so people won't arrest
For second grade.
babies,
First
toddlers,
graders.
children. That's nuts.
Babies.
That's crazy.
No. And I think people, and most of the people arguing for it were men, and I think they just forget what children are, if they ever knew, because, I mean, I have a 7-year-old currently. You know, if you lock her up and put her in handcuffs, you have forever changed the trajectory of her life. She is traumatized.
Yeah.
And this
Look at
happened.
3 to
Oh,
5.
and all the
and-
children around her. You're creating a police state. You're creating fear, not power. Children are
Right.
supposed to go to school to learn, to become who they're going to be. But what they're doing is saying, you little things, you better watch it. Because
Right.
we're going to get you earlier and earlier and earlier. And you better do what we say. We're the dominant culture. We're the people who make the decisions. And you buck us, it's going to hurt
Yeah.
you. That's what
That's
they're
right.
doing. They're trying to do a zero tolerance type of thing. Zero tolerance never, ever works because it's
Mhm.
never one size fits all. That's why I don't like scoring guidelines. That's why I don't like sentencing guidelines. I like things to work for the situation right there.
Right.
I just don't see why we have to have laws that say stupid things like don't arrest 5-year-olds. I
It's
mean,
ridiculous.
what bonehead doesn't know that that's a bad idea?
You would be
And it's
shocked.
happening more and more and more when kids return to school. The handbook is bigger, 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 and it's just very sad, you know. And as a parent, you know, that's not my child, but as a parent, I'm a mother and I care about children. So I'm very much going to be in tune to how these things affect my children and their classmates and what's going on my school board. So that's, you know, I don't look at it as, oh, that doesn't affect me. That doesn't affect my children or my family, or, you know, tell my kids, don't worry about that. That has nothing to do with us. I don't. I tell them, tell me what's going on, because I want to know, because any day, if that can happen to any of our children.
Okay.
And so I think it's just very important, you know, just as you mentioned, the protesting. I'm very active about my daughters going out there, the HB1. That was something that my twins were like, so we can't go out there and protest when we graduate from college. I'm like, you can protest. We're
Yeah.
going to go. If there's something that's important to you that you want to, and I don't want to say protest, but there's things that have caught their attention that they want me to take them to.
Mhm. Yeah.
You know, there was,
It's participating in your democracy. It's
they
being
just
an
want to go.
informed,
They want,
active citizen. It's not something that should be, you know, put down. That's something that should be encouraged, because the more people do it peacefully, the more we can be heard and bring attention to things. But what they're trying to do is say, you people who bitch about what we tell you to do, we want you to stop. Just
Stay
take
in
our
your
crap,
box.
stay in your lane, take our
Yeah.
crap, and do it with a smile on your face. I mean it. That's the
Right.
message.
You're protesting to begin with because your one voice cannot be heard. Like, it's taking
Right.
people who have to get in a big group and march in the street to be heard in the first place, and telling
Yeah.
them, even that, we don't want to hear from you.
I remember when they started doing this Black Lives Matter, this is about 10 years ago. I think it was like 2010, maybe, whatever. They were at the Capitol. Remember, they would go in there and they'd sit right outside the governor's office
Mhm.
all day long. Well, I'll have you know, I was the first person to bring those people pizza. My friend Sharon Russell called me and she goes, they need to eat. And I go, Dana Brooks is your girl. Let's get some pizza, take it down there. Boy, next thing you know, about a week later, no more food. The locks are, you know, we're going to lock the place up at 5. I mean, they're just doing anything they can to quelch these people's, you know, ability to protest their government's decisions and to be heard. And it's just so, and the thing about it that kills me the most, it's about the most un-American
Oh my goodness.
thing. This whole
Yeah.
country was founded on people going, I'm not taking your shit anymore. Okay.
Yeah.
Sick of you.
Sick
And
of
then
it.
now they want to act like we're prim and proper English people who need to just, you know, not say cuss words in public and stay in your lane. And, you know, women, ask your husbands for permission to do whatever the hell you want to do. It's like, are you not an American? Are you
I
not an
know.
American? Did you skip history? I mean, we're
know.
rabble rousers. That's what we are.
That's what we are. Good trouble.
Trying to change our DNA. We're Americans.
Yeah.
my,
Infuriating.
my family,
Somebody
my
speak
kids,
up here before I have a heart attack. I'm
Yeah.
so mad.
well, my children will say, well, what can we not do today? Well, first of all, you know, I'll admit we listen to a certain station every morning. I listen to it, so they're used to hearing all these different topics. They're very much like to, they have their little minds. They like to know what's going on. So they just tell me, so I guess we're just gonna not talk, Mom. I'm like, no, because it's people. I said, it's your generation. Keep it going. Keep it
Right.
going.
That's right.
Mom can only do so much. There's, as you, Miss Carrie, you're doing what you can, but it's like, no, we keep it going.
That's what
You
they're
know,
trying to do.
just-
They're trying to stop these young people from being liberal as soon as
Right.
they can, because young people always push back against authority. And then they go to college and they learn that they don't know everything, and then they get hip to other cultures and other ideas, and they go, oh, I don't know everything. I do need to consider a different point of view.
Yeah.
That creates a liberal. And then they're like, oh, I hate a liberal, I hate a liberal. Why? Because they don't stay in their lane. They're very hard to control. That's why people don't like us. Me,
Yeah.
I'm a liberal. I am totally identify as one. But they're trying to get to our kids early.
Yeah.
And I don't like that. I'll parent my kids. Thank you. These are the same exact people
Right.
who lost their freaking minds when Hillary Clinton wrote that book, It Takes a Village. It does
Oh,
not
yeah.
take a village. It takes two parents. That's all it takes to raise a kid. You don't need help. If you're a good parent, you can raise your bullshit. It
Yeah.
takes teachers, it takes pastors, it takes neighbors, it takes sometimes nannies and housekeepers. So don't miss me
Right.
with that. Okay.
But
It
even
does take
that,
a village.
even
But
that
yeah.
was so privileged to think that every child has a cisgendered mom and dad in the house, and it's this perfect little cutout of what society is. Yeah, I
You're
totally
supposed to
remember
make
that.
exact replicas of yourself forever.
Yeah.
You're supposed to be
No,
as good
that
as
is-
anything else.
It wasn't real when they thought it was real. So let's get it real.
Right.
So stop with the fabricated family. That was never real. That was some mom's usually sitting around on her Valium having her third martini by 5 o'clock just to
Right.
survive that life sentence.
That's
No,
right. There's a book I read about 25 years ago called The Way It Never Was. And it was really this romanticism of the 50s and the
Yeah.
60s. And it was not the glamour, happy housewives utopia. And
So the advent of Valium, I'm not joking. There's literally research that showed that's how
Yes.
housewives lived
Yeah.
through that environment. They weren't happy. They
Nobody was
just not
happy.
feeling it.
Yeah.
It's so interesting to me how that goes through waves too. It's like the 50s was a very regressive time. It's not like it's like we were progressing, up until that point. No, we went backwards.
Yeah, we
Like people in the 20s, 30s, women started getting education, people started wanting to have careers. My grandparents who grew up in the Great Depression, the women worked outside the home. And then it was the next generation really that was like, get back in your house.
Yep.
And it's so weird to me how that has fluctuated.
When I had my daughter in the early 90s, in the late 80s, early 90s, it was very much back to that. You wanted to stay at home. That was a sign of affluence, was that your husband was successful enough to where you could stay home and raise your children. And so that was the gold standard. Everybody was measured by, if you're good enough, mom, oh, you work, you have to work. Oh, I'm good. It was that whole
And if you were
thing. And then now I love this new generation. I like millennials and Gen Z. I like them. But I like that what I love about them, they're so irreverent. They're like, if I have a kid, I'll do it my way. I don't need any input from you. And I may be married, I may not be married. It doesn't matter, but I don't want to hear from you about it. I'm going to do my thing. But this is what we're going to get if we don't ease up on the way we're treating children, because they're taking the power of parenting away from the parents and putting it in the hands of law enforcement and teachers and those sorts of people. You know what's going to happen? People can start having kids.
Right.
It already costs a lot of money that a lot of people don't have. And it's not easy. It's harder every day. Every day, I thank God I have a grown child and that I'm not dealing with the things B has been describing, dealing with her kids. I didn't have to deal with that stuff. I didn't have to deal with it. And I don't know if I would do it again. I really don't. It's overwhelming to me. And we're going to end up with a population problem if we don't get off people's backs. I think we already have one, but I don't think that's going to get better until we make it a little bit more equitable for everybody.
Yeah.
I think the minute when we get together in numbers and we start being more vocal, that's when they want us. Okay, that's too much. You're getting out of hand. Get back in your lane. And that's what I love Miss Dana. She's all the time like, no, Nobody's
Oh,
putting anybody in any lanes.
That's what I love about my age. I love being single at my age. I can say anything I want.
You've earned it.
Get to be me. Hey, we got some people watching, y'all. Let's see. We've got Jenny Lee Smith said good afternoon. We've got Catherine Register. She said
Hi,
something was the
Catherine.
absolute truth. So she's loving that. And then we've got Sarah Ann Murphy Scott. She particularly liked my quote about not taking your shit anymore. No, anybody's got any questions for our guest today, please send them. I'm looking at the feed now so I can get them, but if y'all have any questions. But I wanted to ask you, is there anything going on in session that has happened or is imminent that particularly affects women, since we are on the EmPower Hour?
Yes, I mean, there are any number of bills pending. Unfortunately, this session is a little different. It's really been focused on the budget, getting the sales tax passed, and tackling the unemployment situation. The system, as you know, is just broken. Like literally the system doesn't work. So people who apply for unemployment cannot get benefits. And there's a political warfare going on about giving benefits that people have earned versus encouraging them to take benefits and not going back to work. And so again, it's this like supremacist culture that just thinks people are lazy and don't want to work, which we know is not the case. And so Rep. Escamani down in Orlando, she's filed some fantastic legislation that unfortunately isn't moving. There is a bill pending that would raise weekly benefits. And primarily the people who are suffering in COVID are women of color. And so we know that women disproportionately have been affected by COVID, and especially women of color. So this would really impact them. I don't know if it's going to make it across the finish line. It's still hung up in the last negotiations.
Yeah. And another thing is another, just another boastful ignorance that I keep hearing these, well, people don't want to work. They're getting more money off their unemployment, so they won't even work. So they're trash people. No, honey, what that really means is some people can't go back to work if they want to because they now have additional caregiving responsibilities. Maybe they're caring for some shut-in older people, parents, your parents, his parents, their parents. Maybe you got to take care of some kids and you're homeschooling and you're becoming a teacher and all this kind of stuff. I could not have done that. I'm certain of it. I could not have taught my child. I could not have done it. So all this is going on. And then they do have unemployment. What is unemployment though? What are these benefits, these stimulus checks? That's the government saying, you got to eat, you got to live, and I'm going to give you some money. I'm not going to make you rich, but I'm going to give you something. So if what the government gives you just to keep you from dying is more than what somebody was paying you to work, then you were working for poverty wages. Those people were getting over on you. And so those people need to pay people what they're worth, the value of their work, and then they'll come back to work if they can. But if someone is choosing to take the money from the government, why would they work for you if you're not going to pay them the fair value of what they're worth if they have another option? And what the government's giving you, they're not trying to make people rich. So if you're not making that, you're working and you're getting the kind of money that the government would give you to keep you from dying, you're not getting paid enough. And people don't want to admit that because we're all capitalists in this country. We'll pay you as little as you'll let me get away with paying you. If I don't care about keeping you, if I can take you or leave her, I don't care. That's how it goes. But the truth is, this is not a laziness problem. This is a greed problem.
It's a greed problem. It's an inequity problem, lack of access to resources problem. Just like we were talking earlier, you know, the legislature is pretty much cut off to the public right now. So unless you can get them on a Zoom meeting, which is really difficult for Jack or Jill, common person, they're not going to hear from you. And unless they're Allison Tan or Lorraine Osley or Raymond Alexander, you know, not all of them are going to listen, period. And so that's a huge issue. Interestingly, Senator Book, who's going to be the new minority leader next year or next term, she had a pelvic consent bill up that clarifies that you have to have consent to perform pelvic exams on women. Once again, it's 2021, but we have to carve out that just because someone is under anesthesia or unresponsive, maybe they were in an accident or something, you have to have their consent to do a pelvic exam. So that's a bill that's going to make it through. She
The
also
fact that
had,
that is necessary just sent chills up my back.
isn't it?
Like, she's unconscious. Let's just take a peek. Why not?
But you know what
Yeah.
I've watched because of Netflix, because of COVID, I'm all up on my Netflix. And I found that this literally has happened. I mean, I saw an interview of this woman. She goes, every time I went to the doctor, if I had a sinus infection, I got a pelvic exam. I didn't know. He's a doctor, whatever. No, he's a
Yeah.
pervert. He's a
He's a
pervert.
pervert. He's a, I guess maybe he's a pedophile depending on his age, or the age of the person. But yeah, and so that's something that's been moving this year, and it'll pass. She had a wonderful bill that would seek to address period poverty, which again,
That's my jam.
yeah. So we need to talk to you. I'm the vice chair of the Commission on the Status of Women and Girls, and that's our project this year.
That's my jam.
Catherine Register is our coordinator, so she's listening. But
Yeah.
that was I just don't think it has the legs yet to do a statewide initiative, but we have widespread support here from the mayor to the commission, so the schools. So we're going to get products into public spaces very quickly. So that's fantastic.
We're partnering with a young woman. It's her school project. Did you hear about that?
I saw her.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, we're gonna get the dispensers in all at least the public schools in this county.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
there's
I'll staff them every year.
So that's great. I'm sure that you all heard about the bill that would modify alimony, also known as maintenance.
Tell me about that. I don't know that one.
So this comes up all the time. And so I used to,
Because legislators are usually men.
they're men. They don't, I mean, let's be honest. They're looking at
They stroke a lot of checks for those screw ups they have in those first and second marriages.
Yeah. So yeah, they're looking at not paying. I mean, let's just be real. So I did divorce practice for several years before I ran as far and as fast as I could from that. And, this bill would modify the conditions for alimony and maintenance. And so it would be very hard for people who have disabilities, for example, to get long-term maintenance. And there's all these myths and misnomers and just outright lies about alimony. You have to work. I mean, unless you're physically unable to work, you have to have a job. And so they tried to get that through, and it's dead so far. And then the other piece, which I've lobbied against in 2 other states, was the presumption of equal 50-50 parenting time. No matter what. Right. So you start with the presumption that it's in the best interests of a child to have 50-50. And that's
absurd.
Let's just be honest. It serves.
Comically absurd. It's laughable.
It's laughable, and that's not reality. And again, it's a financial incentive. The less time,
if you get more time, you pay less support.
Oh my God. And they don't
exercise your time. And
when I was a mediator, family law mediator, I saw this all the time. The guys wanted the extra nights so they don't have to pay the child support. But then the minute they get them, they don't exercise them. So the woman has to keep a record, do all this stuff, and go back to the court and say he has them in name only. Anything comes up, he'll use as an excuse not to come get this kid.
That's
and
right.
I get stuck with them. And then when they're with me, I can't do anything. I can't plan my life. I can't do any of the stuff that I want to do because I got to be back up. What I'm going to do, say I'm just not going to take care of this kid because you're not, and we'll just leave them alone. No, of course I have to be there.
No.
They know I'm going to be there. So it derails any kind of second gig operation they have to make that money back up. Those kids are still eating, using electricity, taking showers, consuming in the house, just like they were, but you're not getting any money because he's Mr. I have my kids all the
you
time.
can't just do it like law school, like, well, you're constructively at your dad's, so.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, but
Sorry, this is Dad's Day, wherever you actually happen to be. We've created a legal fiction that you're at Dad's.
It is a legal fiction.
It's a legal fiction.
But it makes me really mad because there's so many women, and I'm all about empowering women to choose whatever life that they want, including a biblical life, including a life where you are subordinate to your husband, including a life where you take care of the home and those sorts of things. That's all fine and good, but I sure do want you to do it with your eyes open.
If that's what you want to do.
And make sure that you understand and are prepared for the big 3 Ds in marriage: divorce, death, disability.
Mm-hmm.
That disabilities are worse because you're relying on this man's income and he didn't go away like he would with death and divorce. He's here and he's disabled, and you got to take care of him with less money. So
that's right.
People need to understand that, you can pray all day, But I've never seen God come down and take care of that financial problem when a man dies, leaves, or becomes disabled. I've never seen that happen.
That's right. And you know, when I was a divorce lawyer, the one thing I always stressed to my clients was, even if you have to pay for it yourself, you get a life insurance policy on his life, because you never
Yes,
know.
you do. You damn
And
sure do.
that's right. And if you don't have assets, you have to imagine that he's just gone and the income is gone.
That's
And,
right.
you know, that's a very stark reality, but that's unfortunately. The
Yeah.
other thing I would share is, you know, when I was the policy director and the general counsel for a statewide domestic violence organization, we collaborated with some researchers at George Washington University, and there was a study that came out that said, they did a study across the country, women who sought to hold their abusers accountable in court lost custody of their children by such an unbelievably high standard, or they at least lost
They lost something for sticking up for
something.
themselves.
So the judges are just not getting this. And even here in Leon County, I know many examples where even dear friends of mine had gone to court and lobbied for their children because of what they suffered due to alcoholism or abuse.
Or
And the
or
court,
or
yeah,
how they like what Ellie Rosario is on here, and she
Yeah.
talked about how the courts are not, you know, helpful to women, and she had instances. And I know I'm not speaking out of school because she puts this in her book,
yeah.
but you
I
know,
was
she had a
talking
husband.
about Ellie.
Yeah, that's right. She's got a
Yeah.
husband who's or the children's father is driving with them drunk.
I know.
And the courts are like, well, unless he's doing it right now and something happened, I can't do a thing for you. Now, don't misunderstand me. I get that. We're responsible for the mates we choose. We can't ask the courts to come in and take care of it whenever we hook up with the wrong people. But the law, at least in Florida, and I think it's that way most people, the state has a greater interest in your child than you do. That's why the state can
That's
tell
right.
you what to do as a parent. So take care of the kid. I'm coming to you and I want some help. But every time they show up, and this is what happens, you show up and you file an injunction or you get involved with the court system. Next thing you know, they're getting involved. They got a lawyer get involved. Then they flip the switch, because that's what any good lawyer does, is
Right.
turn a defense into an offense. I've lettered in that. That is my name. Okay. But that's what they do. And they'll start going, oh, well, what about you? What about you? And next thing you know, you're defending yourself now.
Right.
And then the DCF or somebody comes in and goes, well, I don't know, but it looks like this is not a good environment for these kids. Let's take them, let's remove them, let's do something. And you're going, I came to y'all for help.
I
You know,
know.
why am I the villain? But it happens, like you said, if you look, and it's not just
All the time.
anecdotal stories like Ellie, like you said, there's statistics behind this.
Oh, it's science. It's definitely a thing. And, you know, that was a really rough thing to advise a client about when I knew that someone had been neglected or abused or the person was drinking. It's like, I can tell you what the law says, and I can tell you what this judge is going to do.
Yeah.
And they're not always the same thing. And
Well, I will tell you this, at least in the second judicial circuit, we got a whole bunch of young lawyers, young judges. And people think judges are things that you can't do anything about. Yes, you can.
Yes, you can.
That is not true anymore. Judges, once they're judges, they can lose that.
Yes.
They just have to not get elected. Somebody has to challenge. People used to never challenge a sit-in judge. They do now, and they win sometimes. So I'm liking all the women that I'm seeing on the bench. I'm liking women of color on the bench, especially when it comes to dealing with children, family issues, those sorts of things, because they have a unique perspective that older white men just do not.
They don't have that
They're not,
perspective.
their perspective, their orientation from when they were married and they were bringing up children, 180 degrees. It's not like that anymore. So you've got to roll with it, and you've got to be open to learning. And a lot of, I'm not saying every old white judge is terrible, but I'm just saying, I sure do like looking up at that bench and seeing some people who look like me for a minute. That's nice. Listen,
That's right.
we are over, but we could be going all day long, because y'all got me fired up. Probably gonna go write a blog or do a video on this. I'm so mad. But I appreciate you coming in here, because people don't have a lobbyist that they can talk to and find out what's happening during the session, and all these bills that are being pushed through that are going to affect us and limit our rights further. And like you said, this year especially, they can't just go down there and watch like you used to do. I guess you could watch. I'm sure they're still televising some things, but if you're not getting testimony, or your testimony is limited, it's just not the same thing. So I appreciate you allowing us to have access to you, especially right now during crunch time.
That's awesome.
Rose B, do you have any closing comments you want to end with today, Rose?
No, I just thank Carrie for being here, and it's something that I don't pay as much attention to with legislature as I probably should. And I appreciate her illuminating us.
Yeah. Yeah, I used to be the one who'd go down there and testify and stuff when I was first starting out as a lawyer, but I just went down there, got my nose bloody, and I come back to the office. Nothing ever went my way. And now I just don't have the stamina for abuse like I used to. B, what are your final thoughts for today?
Thank you. Thank you for being out there. Thank you for fighting for all these issues that are very important to a parent like myself, my children, for it affects us in all ways. And I just want to go back and say thank you for saying, in regards to everything that happened with the trial that just happened, to saying that you're privileged and being open and saying. And I think, and I say that because I come from a very blended family. So that's all we want to know. We just want to say, hey, I don't understand, but I'll listen. So
Yeah.
thank you. Because that's how you open up the lines of communication. So thank you for your work. I'm excited. And all the work that you're doing out there. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Carrie. This is Carrie Boyd, and she's policy director for the Southern Poverty Law Center. She joined us today to give us an update on the session and issues that affect women and people of color and people with disabilities and people who just don't usually have the biggest voice in the room. So thank you for everything you do. I appreciate you deeply. And so I can't wait to get to know you better and see you more often whenever things normalize. So thanks again. And this has been another episode of the EmPower Hour, brought to you by the EmPower Plant by Facing Brooks. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.